Yo, what is up guys? How are you all doing? And welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and today let's discuss the current state of the gaming industry. So I think this should be a pretty interesting and fun topic for a video, and as with most topics for me, this is definitely something that I've been thinking about for quite a while and felt that it was probably time to go ahead and address it, where we're kind of in like the middle/end of the holiday season for 2017. There's a lot that's culminated in the gaming industry and all three major console players leading up to this point. We've got a couple of last pretty big titles to go for the end of the year, and then 2018 is right around the corner, which seems so insane to me, and it just reminds me how much older I'm getting every day, that it's going to be 2018 so soon. I can't even believe it. But I just think that this is probably something that should be interesting to talk about. So of course, as you could tell by the title of this video, what I wanted to do was sort of check in with the gaming industry, with the current console players, and with this, quote, 8th generation. And man, at this point, even putting a label on the generations feels kind of weird, I think, and for so many reasons that most of us know why. But it's kind of the best way to really simply frame the conversation and the current state of the industry and the current state of Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft individually. So that's kind of what we're going to do, and as we get further into this, it'll seem even a little bit more strange to call it the, quote, 8th generation. But again, we're trying to just not split hairs here for the simplicity of the video and to just have an easy framing device for how we're discussing everything going on. And what I wanted to do is basically discuss the good, the bad, and the weird that's been going on with video games, with the industry, with all the console manufacturers, and all of this crazy stuff leading up to this point. So, I'm an optimist, man. You guys know that. People who have been following me and familiar with Rule of Two Review for a while, I think pretty much understand my personality and my perspective and approach to games and gaming companies, and even like scandals and controversial things. And I definitely am the video game optimist. It's actually just sort of how I operate in general. So we've got a lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot of weird to discuss, hence the nature of how I'm trying to go about this. But I'm really trying to not be the most negative Nancy about a lot of these things, even the bad stuff, despite the fact that some of the bad is really, really bad. But what I want to do is actually start with the bad so that we can kind of trend upwards. We'll start with the bad, get into the weird, and then we'll end on the positive note with all of the good. So I'm actually really excited to do it that way. So as best as we can label it, the 8th generation, again in quotes, consists of the PlayStation 4 and all of its iterations, the Xbox One and all of its iterations, and the now Nintendo Switch, and also the Wii U. That has to be factored in here, and we will be getting to the relevance of the Wii U and Switch thing as well a little bit later in the conversation. So just so we all understand what it is that I'm really looking at when discussing what the, quote, 8th generation is, 10 years from now, we probably won't even be talking about generations and numbering them the way we traditionally have. So that's going to be really interesting in another decade, but for now, that's the best we got. So as far as the bad, let's discuss the worst of the worst and the bad things that are happening. I have two major bullet points for each category here that I wanted to discuss. And so with the bad, we're going to start off, obviously, with the absolute bottom of the barrel, the carrion-feeding garbage of the video game industry, and obviously the zeitgeist controversy, the current thing that is a big deal and people have been losing their minds over, and mostly rightfully so, and it is monetization of games. And how the heck did we get here? How are we looking at this problem in this industry, which is so sad because it feels like such a gross, skeezy, underhanded sort of business practice that's been happening, and we know the examples. We know the loot boxes and the microtransactions. We know what previously has been really poorly implemented and expensive DLC and season passes, which is kind of still a problem, but it's been lost in this conversation because of the more recent problems and scandals with the loot boxes and everything with EA and Activision and Shadow of War and all these different things. And it's a pretty big issue, and I think that all of these things combined lead us to this current problem. So the monetization, if I can say that right, of games is a problem. These companies are, and I made a whole video discussing, I think, why this problem exists and how gaming companies, if they were smart, could realize they could fix this problem and not have to charge all these extra stupid garbage business practices. But at this point, we don't know when they're going to figure this out. We're dealing with companies saying, hey, just selling a game for $60 isn't enough for us to make our money back. So here comes all the stuff that's going to demand that you pay extra money, and you're always pulling your debit card out of your wallet because you have to buy this cool new thing just to get a dumb box dropped into your face just so that ridiculous icons can throw at the screen right up at you and be like, hey, you spent $2.99 and got 3 things you didn't even want or need just because you're trying to cheat your way into being a better player in the game. And these companies have been starting to realize that because of the mobile free-to-play market, that they can, at least they thought they could, start to implement these practices into major AAA, or at least high-budget, full-priced retail games. And that, of course, has been the big problem. And we know all the examples of this. Obviously, Battlefront 2 is the recent, current, and easily the messiest of them all. There's also Middle-earth Shadow of War, there's Call of Duty, there's Destiny, there's Overwatch, even though some people cite Overwatch as a positive example of how to do it correctly. I don't know the game well enough to confidently say that, but from everything I've heard and seen, I do pretty much believe that that probably is true. Regardless, it still is a very microtransaction heavy experience, and they do definitely rely on that stuff. And, you know, then we get into the whole season pass thing, and you know, this even started with games in the last couple of years where suddenly season passes were $50, almost the same full price as just the game. And we even have the special collector's editions, and now they have to charge us, you know, $170 so you can take home this freaking huge box for your little tiny game disc, you know, that can barely even fit in people's cars, just because the gaming industry is reeling and tripping over itself to find extra ways to make more money beyond the initial price of a game. And to me, for not even just because they're greedy, even though that's obviously a huge factor, but also because, as I stated in my own video, they can't keep their damned budgets under control. And so that's easily, of the bad, that is the worst trend and the worst thing we're seeing in 8th generation 2017, almost 2018 gaming. It's a real problem, and we do luckily live in this great time where just recently the gamer has fought back. As I also discussed in my own video, the gamer started to cry out. Thanks to EA's practices with Battlefront 2, no one was happy with them, no one wanted to see those included in the game, and everyone fought and they downvoted on Reddit, and the AMA went horribly, and EA had no idea how to fix the problem other than to do what they should have known in the first place, which is not include these things in the game. And so if there's any positive we can take away from this big negative of the video game industry, it's that we might be seeing the slight beginnings of the changing tides, and we might be seeing further evidence of how powerful the gamer's voice is. And it's my favorite thing about how the whole thing played out. Because I'm obviously, you guys know, I'm somebody who's invested in Star Wars and was very excited for Battlefront 2. And I'm playing the game, and it's pretty darn good gameplay-wise and story-wise. But it's obvious that they have the shell of a game because they were trying to implement this horrible thing that nobody wanted. And just like the gamer was able to rise up and stop Microsoft from incorporating this horrible DRM that was going to destroy their entire Xbox One business model before it launched, we're also affecting this change in this huge company with their incredibly high-profile game. And oh my goodness, they've backpedaled on all of it. We do have to give it a couple months to see if they end up kind of undoing some of the, quote, good that they've done by removing microtransactions. They basically said they're going to re-implement them, but we don't know how. It's probably going to be another problem once they do, so who knows. But it doesn't still mean that we can't take what has happened as a victory for the gamer and for us as people speaking out against this huge problem and saying, hey, this is not how you do it. You have to figure out your budget problems. Now, the other bad currently happening in gaming right now is an interesting one, and it's pretty unfortunate, and I think it's Microsoft's weird confusion and their lost way, so to speak. I feel like that's what I feel comfortable calling it, is that they have lost their way currently. They are a very confusing company. I like Microsoft. I like the Xbox brand. I think my Xbox One is fantastic. I really love the console, even though there's not a whole lot of exciting software coming out for it currently. As a console and as a device that plays video games and one of the 3 major consoles available, I enjoy it. I think they have the best controller on the market. I love the cleanness and smoothness of how at least my Xbox One runs. It's very quiet. I have no issues with it. Easily the least amount of issues of any console. Well, not including the Switch, but of the other consoles, the least amount of issues I've had with the Xbox One. And so they make a great product, and I enjoy the fact that we've had for a couple of generations now 3 main players doing their thing with Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft. So it's not like I'm like down on Microsoft as a company or the Xbox brand. I really like it and I want to see it do well, but Microsoft seems lost. I mean, what is their real business model and what is their real goal? They've lost the ability to secure quality exclusives. There's not a lot of software overall coming out for the console. All we've really had is, you know, the typical standard multi-platform third-party support. You know, a library the last 2 years that's 90% identical to what's been coming out on the PlayStation 4, which for the most part have been looking and performing and selling better on the PlayStation compared to the Xbox. So that slowed down sales of the console. It slowed down sales of software. And when we get into some of the newer consoles they've released, that's part of a different conversation for later in the video, so I don't want to tread too much into that here. But there's no doubt that they seem confused. And let me actually step into that conversation for just a quick second. Part of the confusion and the weirdness is their newest release of the Xbox One X a couple of weeks ago. Now, from what I understand, it is a quality machine, so again, hooray, great job, Microsoft. You seem to have made a good product. But who is it marketed for? Who is it selling to? The numbers aren't lighting anyone on fire. The purpose of the power and the 4K resolution and all these cool extra digital things you're throwing into the machine, no one really seems to understand why they're there and what you're trying to add to gaming when you're also constricting all of the games on the Xbox One X to also having to be the same as base Xbox One games. And I'm not even necessarily saying that's the wrong way to go about it, because you don't want to segregate your Xbox audience too much, because then that'll create more confusion and not really be a good thing for your business. But it just adds to the level of lostness, quote, I guess, I'll make up a word, the lostness of Microsoft and the Xbox brand right now. And I love Phil Spencer. He's a smart guy, and I firmly believe that he is very dedicated and passionate about the Xbox gaming brand and is proud of it and wants to continue to see it flourish. But all these canceled games and lost games, and Crackdown was delayed, and the Xbox One X seems confusing, and why does it exist and no one's really buying it? And I just really think that it could possibly be spelling a bad future for Microsoft. Maybe they're either going to leave the console industry soon by choice, or maybe they'll be forced out because this is showing that they simply can't course correct the weird and precarious situation that they're in. Now let's get into the weird, because there's been a lot of weird with this whole industry. Even the bad stuff also could probably qualify under the, quote, weird category. But the 2 bullet points I want to talk about under the weird things that we see in current 8th generation modern 2017 gaming are actually 2 very similar things, but different enough that I want to have 2 conversations about them. And the first does relate to kind of what I was just talking about, and it's those mid-gen refreshes and the decisions by Microsoft and Sony to make these weird upgraded versions of their consoles just a couple of years after their launch. The PS4 Pro, the Xbox One S, and now the new Xbox One X. Sony did also release the PS4 Slim, but they've done that a couple of times in the past, and even Xbox did that with the 360, so the Slim console thing isn't quite the same as like the, quote, refresh or the upgrade, but it is a new piece of hardware that they put out. And so it's important to note that this is the weird category, so these things that I'm talking about, like these mid-gen refreshes, I'm not trying to state that they are bad things. It's just really interesting and odd to see these happening, right? I mean, tell me if you guys agree that it's just a very curious and odd thing to be seeing that Sony and Microsoft. Is this a sign that they were just ill-prepared to release their new consoles? Were they actually rushed to market and not powerful enough and capable enough for what the industry and developers and the gamers were demanding and expecting out of their next consoles? A lot of people have been saying that for a while. I actually tend to probably believe that that was the case, that they did certainly rush those systems out. And so all of a sudden they had to scramble, and they released new machines that are these weird refreshes that are trying to push like resolution based on the TVs that you're buying with your HDR and your 4K and stuff that is totally fine. Like, I'm not against it. But to start to adapt your business model mid-generation with new full-priced hardware seems weird, just to accommodate like 4K TVs and the push from the entertainment industry to try to get 4K televisions and computer monitors into people's homes. And granted, I'm not going to like totally undersell 4K because it is absolutely growing. I'm not going to state that it's a total waste for the entertainment media as a whole to be pushing towards it or acknowledging it. I mean, more and more people are buying 4K TVs. They're way more affordable than they were even a year ago. So to a degree, I get that, and it's why it doesn't qualify as, like I said, a bad thing happening in gaming right now. But it's really strange, and, you know, I don't love that it kind of makes it confusing for the average consumer. All of us can follow what's going on. We're hip, smart gamers. We're following the industry daily, so we know this stuff. But it weirdly just kind of segregates your market and alienates some of your audience, I think. And you get into the weirdness of some games, you know, all games work on your original PS4 and Xbox One, but also some games have a patch you can download for 1 trillion gigs that allow you to take advantage of the new power of your new machines. And it's like, okay, so you're asking people to take up hard drive space, and only some games will take advantage of the new power of the console that they just paid a bunch of extra money for, and also then the developers have to spend the time and money to even make the patch, and you're putting it into contracts when maybe they don't even want to spend the money on it. And so it's just this weird cyclical thing. Like I said, not bad, because from what I understand, PS4 Pro and Xbox One X are quality machines, and that is good. But it just it's just weird, man. It's just weird. So let's move on to Nintendo. Of course, you knew I was going to eventually get to Nintendo. My favorite company. A lot of you guys who follow Rule of Two Review, your favorite company too. Obviously, we love to talk about Nintendo. And they've got their own weirdness going on. And I'll be really curious to hear what you guys think about this sort of concept that I have as far as what qualifies as, quote, weird from Nintendo. And this is something that will also slowly segue into the good. So just a reminder when it comes to this sort of topic. But from Nintendo, when I see what's happening weirdly in modern gaming, I actually will say that I think the Wii U into Switch transition is a weird thing. And reminder, because I know it's so easy for people, I mean, my audience, you guys are mostly Nintendo fans, so it might be easy to just jump on, like, this defensive train and be like, oh, how can you say that? It's not weird, it's great, blah, blah, blah. And again, we're segueing into good here, so just be a little patient when it comes to this. But, yeah, I actually do think it's weird. Weird is not bad. Weird is just weird. And when you think about the fact that this generation, again, quote, 8th generation, we're doing our best, we're just focusing it into 8th generation. Please, you guys, don't lose your mind over that phrasing, okay? Because I know some people are going to want to do that. That's why I keep repeating this. So when it comes to the 8th generation, it kicked off with the Wii U in 2012. That was the first new generation console after the PS3, Wii, and 360 era. And a year later is when we got Microsoft and Sony's boxes. And for a time, for a handful of years, that was the 8th generation. Those were all the current competitors on the market. The PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the Wii U. That was gaming. That was console gaming. And you guys know I love the Wii U, but we obviously understand its fate. It wasn't successful. And so after just 4 years, actually, let me even go back. 2 years into the console's life cycle, I would say around the time of that holiday 2014, a little bit after. I know you guys are going to Google when the first announcement of the NX was made, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember, I don't have it in front of me. But I know around that time, in the ballpark of 2 years into the Wii U's life, that's when all of a sudden we started to get this idea and official comments from Iwata and Nintendo. We're also kind of, you know, by the way, doing this other brand new console. It's called the NX. That's coming later by. And that was like what happened. And we were all like, it was like this tiny blurb in an otherwise big press release about other things they said. And everyone was like, what? Did he say new console? NX? Wait, what is that? What? Oh my God, what is the new Nintendo console? And no one was focused on the Wii U at that point. No one was paying attention to the games or the future games we could expect or the fact that it was the current Nintendo hardware on the market. All of a sudden, all it took was one sentence that wasn't even the focus of the presentation, and the entire industry and all Nintendo fans completely shifted gears and focused on what was happening with the then NX. And that's a weird thing if you think about it. It was a weird choice, I think, to talk about the NX when they did, but obviously, I mean, in hindsight, we can say it was probably pretty smart. I mean, it must have been really apparent to Nintendo early on. The Wii U wasn't going to go anywhere. It couldn't sustain a full 8th generation, 5, 6, 7 year life cycle like they probably wanted. Same with Sony and Microsoft, which is why they upgraded their own consoles, by the way. And so Nintendo obviously realized they needed to move on. They planted the seed, but when that happened, everything shifted so suddenly that people were just focused on what this NX thing was. And it was 2 years of freaking rumors and YouTube videos and leaks and all these different things. We all remember 2015 and 2016 Nintendo. What about that NX, yo? What about the NX? Nintendo, give us the NX stuff. Yeah, this game is fine. That game's fine. Whatever. I'm like, okay, Splatoon's really great. Oh, that's neat. But also, what about the NX? And that's what was happening. And now we've seen Nintendo, before Sony and Microsoft have moved on from their PS4 brand and Xbox One brand, because even with their refreshes, those are the two branding of consoles that they still have. Nintendo did, yes, their hand was basically forced, but they made this weird choice to have to abandon the Wii U. Smart as it was weird to do. They abandoned the Wii U and moved on to a brand new console. And we all know that that's panning out incredibly well. I'm going to get to that again in a moment, of course, you guys, so again, be patient. But when you look at that, like on paper, and especially when we look back on it now with hindsight, and even more so probably once we've moved on from the Switch and we're like a couple of years removed from like the newness of the Switch, I think we'll look back on this whole thing, the Wii U into Switch sort of transfer in the middle of this, quote, 8th generation, you know, back in 2016, 2017, isn't that weird? It'll be like, yeah, that was really, what a weird thing. What a weird time 2017 was. And so with that, let's move on to the good. This is the best part. This is the whole reason I even wanted to make the video, because I was like, the state of the union when it comes to video games, the state of the video game industry, where are we at currently? And my mind just kept going to all these great things and all these things that I loved, and I was like, oh, that's great. But then, of course, the loot box thing and the weirdness of Microsoft and the refreshes and everything started to hit me, and I was like, oh, I have this great framing device for this cool conversation for a video. But now we're at the real kicker. This is like the linchpin. This is the exciting stuff. And like I said, I like to end on the positive note. So let's talk about the good things happening in gaming right now. And let's just get it out of the way. Let's just do the thing, you guys, and talk about the best thing happening in gaming right now. And obviously, it's the Nintendo Switch. It is that weird thing. Yes, it was weird for Nintendo to have a console that failed and moved on really soon and then turned it into this whole other business model while the other guys kept their machines going. But weird as it is, it's obviously great because the Switch is a fantastic piece of hardware. It's a wonderful console with an incredible library, way better than we thought it was going to be back when it was launching at the time. And it is insanely successful. I mean, how many times can we talk about it on social media and on YouTube videos about how crazy well the Switch is doing and how smart Nintendo is being right now with its marketing and even just the creation of the console itself. Obviously, the success and the coolness of the Switch is even further punctuated by the fact that Nintendo was in such a deep hole with the Wii U, and there was such a dark era of Nintendo not doing well and people weren't loving them. Even Nintendo fans weren't really all that into Nintendo and the Wii U. The 3DS oddly had to keep them afloat for far too long, even though it definitely did an admirable job and basically did keep them afloat, and some great sales of some Wii U games as well, to be fair. But it's the fact that the Switch literally dug them out of that hole, and it showed Nintendo's ability to completely change their identity, I feel personally, and show that they could be that smart, confident, incredible company. They knew how to make a polarizing and disruptive product that could move the industry in cool, new, different ways, just like they've done many, many times before in the times that they've been successful. And so that is easily one of the best things happening. I mean, Nintendo being successful, not even just because they're my favorite company, and I've got a little bit of fanboyism in me. What can I say? I mean, I love all the companies and consoles. I own them all. But yeah, I've got the Nintendo fanboy in me. That's fine. I can totally admit it. And so I think it's still okay to admit that a strong and confident, successful Nintendo is so very healthy for video gaming as a hobby and for the video game industry because of what Nintendo does. And in my opinion, the video game industry has been at its best, and the video game industry and the hobby has flourished the most when Nintendo has been successful. When they're doing the Wiis, when they're doing the N64s and the Super Nintendos, when they're doing the Game Boys and the Game Boy Advances and the DSs, that's when things really feel like everything is just right in the gaming industry and everyone is making better decisions, and it just feels like gaming has a little bit more purpose because there's a little bit of identity and uniqueness being thrown in with all the mishmash of the other same old regular stuff. And the other main good thing that I wanted to discuss as far as things happening in current modern gaming 2017 is nice and simple. And it's the games. It's literally just the video games themselves, you guys. We had a slow start when it comes to this 8th generation, and that includes the Wii U having a slow start, and the PS4 having a slow start, the Xbox One having a slow start. We didn't see a lot of great exclusives. We didn't see a lot of awesome Nintendo franchises. We didn't even see a whole lot of awesome third-party games. I mean, there was like some good games, of course, in late 2012, late 2013, early 2014, obviously. There were things happening still, but it wasn't consistent, and it still didn't feel like the industry or any of the three companies really had their own identity and their own concept of the libraries that were going to define their consoles and define this current era of gaming. But now, in 2017 especially, I mean, it's been an uphill battle. We've been slowly improving every year since 2012, 2013. But nowadays, I mean, I think we all can agree that we have finally hit a really solid stride when it comes to just the quality of video games. I mean, the conversation this year alone, aided definitely by a successful Nintendo console with a lot of awesome first-party Nintendo games finally thrown into the mix for a full year. We have so many great games to play. We've all been discussing, oh my god, my backlog is getting crazy. Every single month there's a bunch of great games. Nintendo's got a first-party game for like every month, for like 7 months in a row. And then November and September and October have so many games across the board, and even the third parties, and even Sony, and I mean, has a bunch of exclusive, and there's so many games to play right now. We're all struggling, especially if you're a multi-console owner. I mean, I think those of us who have more than one or all three consoles, and of course PC as well, you know, those of us us like that have a variety of gaming, we're screwed. I mean, you guys don't even know how many games I already would have wanted to have purchased and started to play, but I will, yes, I do have the money, but I don't have the time to be able to dedicate to these games, so it becomes poor buying decisions for me to just buy every game. I would have 12 games still sitting in their wrapper to this very minute if I had been buying every game that I want for the Switch, the Xbox One, and the PS4. I've been choosing smartly, knowing that, okay, we're going to hit that drought in early to mid 2018. That's when I'm going to go back and start getting some of this backlog. And we've all discussed this problem. And it is most definitely a great problem to have. And it shows that finally the quality of the software, I think, is caught up to this generation of gaming. And when we finally, even with the Microsoft floundering and struggling to have quality exclusives and get a lot of good games on its console, we're still seeing an unprecedented amount of awesome games across the board. And that shows that while there are some really unhealthy and gross and disgusting and completely unacceptable business practices happening from some companies and some things in the industry, when there are this many good games coming out and we're all struggling to have time to play all of these amazing games that we want to play on all of our different devices available, to me it shows that the video game industry might actually be a lot healthier than we're thinking. We need to just keep fighting the good fight with the bad stuff, but if we don't put all of our attention on that and take a look over here where the grass is a little bit greener and we see all these awesome things happening and Nintendo has so many good games coming and there's so much to play, at least for me on my PS4 and my Xbox One, because I split my third parties between the two. It's great, you know? I think that they're overall looking good, and I think that they are looking up. I know we got the dirt and the scum over here on the left, but over here on the right, we have a bright, sunshiny future of, I think, a lot of awesome games to play. Whew. And so, I think that's it. That was a lot to discuss, man. But you know what? I think it's an important conversation, and I think it's just fun and interesting to take a look at where we are currently. Like I kind of joked in the middle of the video, the, quote, State of the Union of the video game industry, because there's a lot going on right now, man. Yes, there's all that good I talked about, but there is all that bad I talked about as well. And hey, you know what? There's more good I didn't discuss and even more bad I didn't discuss. I mean, this wasn't about let's explore every bullet point that covers the whole thing. I mean, you guys know me. I'm long-winded enough. That would become like a 47-minute video just to break down the 8th generation. So I thought it was interesting to talk about the good, the bad, and the weird happening right now. Overall, I feel great about everything. I know it really sucks to have some of this crappy EA and Activision stuff happening, but I can't stress enough to you guys, I should say, how much faith I have after seeing the way the gamer fought back and the way the Reddit thing played out and the way EA made this huge decision, and now Activision is making the same decision with Destiny, by the way, you guys. So we're starting to see positive things happen. So as much as that's like horrible stuff, there is some positive to take away from it currently, and I just think it's nice to see that good stuff happening, you know? And again, there's a lot of other positive things happening. So I'm going to wrap this up because this was obviously a pretty long video, but this was a lot of fun. So I want to hear what you guys have to say about all the topics that I discussed today. What are the good, bad, and weird things that you see happening in the industry? And overall, how do you just feel about gaming? How are you feeling about the hobby of playing video games and everything that we do and love as video game fans, and obviously a lot of Nintendo fans as well, when it comes to just, you know, sitting around and playing video games? A lot of cool stuff happening, a lot of craziness. So discuss amongst yourselves below. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule to Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.